Hello everyone, Sheila back again. Welcome to my channel. It is a little bit brighter today. We have had some rain, but I forgot I could put my standard lamp on to light up my screen a little bit when it's dark. It's that long since I've used it because I don't usually only use it, and it's in the winter when it gets used, and I've forgotten all about it. It does brighten up the screen a little bit, so anyway, we have had a little bit of rain. It is quite warm today, but that seems to be what happens up where I live. It gets warm, you get rain. That's usually why it's warm, because it's going to rain. But anyway, I'm not knitting, I'm crocheting. This is the third part of I've done the first size and the second size. It's now just after 11, it's 11:30 now. I'm going to knit this. I'll probably get this finished before lunchtime, because I've done the base part, and I'm doing circling around the edges now. But I had been reading one or two things on the internet. I came across something. It was called the learning curve of knitting and sewing. And I thought to myself, well, the learning curve, you never reach that height, where the curve like this, you never reach that height and come back down again, because there's always something new. You can learn. Like with me, it was using cables, the circular cables. I'd never even heard of them before YouTube, actually. In all my years of knitting, I'd never come across them until I started on YouTube and started looking at the things and realised how many people were actually using them. And that was a learning curve to me. It took me quite a while to get used to them, to knowing exactly when you finish your own starter or where you have to have the wool, because if you had the wool inside the cable, it was rather awkward. Yeah, I always had to have it over the top, put it over the top of the cable. So there were things to learn with that. And then after you've learned that, there's always something else you can learn, which I've found quite one or two things on YouTube. But talking about that, I'm going to give you a little story about when I first learned to knit. As I've told you all before, it was my father that taught me how to knit when I was about 6 years old. My father was a steel erector, and he had an accident one time. I think I was about 6. I'm not vaguely absolutely certain, but I think that's how old I was. And he was off work he was laid up for quite some time, actually, because of this. He'd fell off the roof. He must have slipped or something like that and fell anyway, and he injured his back. And he was laid up for quite some time. Well, my father had mentioned that he used to knit because he was in the Navy during the war and that, or even before the war, I think he was in the Navy. And they used to knit when they had breaks and that. My dad used to knit. I don't know who ever taught my dad to knit. I think it might have been something to do with the Navy, because I don't think his mother, my grandmother, never ever taught me anything about knitting or anything in the time that my mother was friends with her. Didn't last very long. Both my grandparents, I never learned anything from either of them, because of the family thing, that there was feuds with both families. So anyway, my father was saying he was laid up, and of course we were around. We saw more of him than we used to when he was working, because when we were little and he was working in that, he was away out. Sometimes we weren't even out of bed when he was away to work. And then we were going to bed when he used to come in. That was the way it was. I never saw much of my father when we were really little. except, you know, the odd weekends and that, because I think he used to work weekends and that as well. But anyway, he was around a lot, and I was sitting watching him knitting one day, and he was just sitting up in bed, actually, because he was in bed for quite some time. And he was sitting knitting, and I sort of asked him what he was making. I think he said it was a pair of, I think, can't remember the exact words, but I'm sure, you know, remembering from that age, sea boot socks. And I remember he wore them the whole time he worked on the steel erecting, that he used to wear Wellingtons, and he used to have those like cream coloured socks that came all the way up the top of the Wellingtons and then went over the top. It stopped them scraping the legs and things like that. So that's what he was knitting, some of them. Well, he was knitting actually with the sets of 4 needles. Actually, the sets of needles came in 4 in my younger day, but they seem to have changed to 5 nowadays. You get them in sets of 5 nowadays, but they were sets of 4, because I have a few sets that I bought myself when I was younger, and they were all sets of 4. But anyway, that's what he was doing, and I was goggle-eyed watching him, you know. And he said to me, "Can you knit?" I says, "No." "Has your mum not taught you?" I says, "Mum hasn't shown me how to knit." So he showed me how to knit. Just how to knit, that was all. He cast some stitches on, got some of my mum's needles and casted some stitches on, enough to make a scarf, that's what he said. And taught me garter, how to knit the garter stitch. Anyway, I knit the scarf. And I remember my mother telling me, "You never seen anything like it. It was full of holes and loops dropped here and everywhere." But she told me that because I was on about the holes in it, that she said, "Oh, you've made a lovely lacy pattern. That's what you get, little holes like that when there's lace pattern in that." But my mother told me, this was years later when we were talking about things when we were kids about knitting and that, she says, "You thought you were the bee's knees with that scarf," she says. "We couldn't get it off you," she says. "You went to bed with it." She says, "We wait until you went to sleep every night, and we used to take it off you because we were frightened you're going to strangle yourself with it." But she says, she took it off me. She says, "You wore it at meal times, everything." And she says, "There was food slopped on it and all sorts." She says, my mother said to me, she says, "We had to take it off you one night," and she says, "wash it while it wasn't dry in time the next morning, because," she says, "there was murder on the next day." But she says, I said to you, she says, "it had to be washed because it was manky." And that was how I started knitting. But my dad only taught me how to actually knit. Afterwards, my mother had to go out to work when my father had this accident, because we couldn't manage on, I think it was called national assistance or something at the time. And you didn't get what you get these days. So my mother had served her time as tailoress. That's what she used to do. Men's suits, altering men's suits and things like that. And she got a job in Isaac Walton's in Newcastle Town Centre, and that's what she did. She was altered men's suits and that, and that was how she wasn't around when my dad was laid up and all that. And it's like saying she had to go out to work, but when she had time, after she used to come in from work and they'd had her tea and that, she'd sit down and she taught me how to cast on. And her method was the cable cast on, which is what I've always done. And she told me other ways to cast on, which was easier, but she said the cable, she didn't call it cable cast on. We didn't know what it was called. She just said that was the best way to cast on. She says it was the neatest, kept its shape. She taught me that, and then she taught me how to do the different stitches, the ribs, and how to do the raglans. And I started off making things for my dolls. You know, I had 1 or 2 dolls that not quite baby size, but smaller. So any little bits of wool I could get, my mum's friends used to come up now and again and bring an odd ball of wool and little bits I had left over from things I had been knitting. And I never realised at the time that I was allergic to wool. But my hands used to be sore, really sore and red. I used to get lumpy and I could only knit for a certain while. And then we started getting different kinds of wool. I think it was probably nylon and like that, and then the acrylic and that, and cotton. Sometimes I think a friend of my mother's had lots of bits of cotton and she used to give me cotton. Don't think my mother even realised that I was allergic to wool. It was just thought I'd been messing about doing something else. But anyway, I started making little things for my dolls, little cardigans and that, and my mother taught me how to sew them up. When you did the raglan, she taught me how to flat stitch the raglings, as that's the way I've always do them now. I do them the way my mother taught me. And then how to back stitch and all the different kind of stitching you do in knitting and that. And I never looked back. I've taught a lot of people how to do things my way on YouTube now and that. I taught my own kids how to knit. I have 3 sons, they all know how to knit. None of them will admit it, but they do know how to knit because I did teach them. And even when I had a knitting machine, I taught one of my sons how to use a knitting machine because he wanted a BMX bike. And it wasn't his birthday, it wasn't Christmas. And I says, you only get things like that, Christmas and birthdays. But at the time, I used to knit. I used to get paid for what I knitted on my knitting machine, and my mother had an old knitting machine and she gave that to me, and I set it up in the one of the rooms for my son, and I told him how to use it. And I says, you knit all the straight pieces on there, and I says, I'll give you so much for every piece you knit when you might have enough. And he did get his BMX bike. But once he got that big, he never looked at that knitting machine again. So that was just a little story to tell you that there is no end to the learning curve of knitting. You can always learn something new, something that someone else does that you might not do, and you might find it better than the way you do things. And anyway, I've got a little bit further with this while I've been sitting chatting, and I will probably get it finished before the post today, because I do have a parcel to post today to a lady called Patricia, who's bought the cardigan that I've done, the little cardigan that I've done. It looks pink on the video. I will get the little cardigan and show you the first one. There. That little cardigan, it actually looks pink on there, but it is more peach. It's a peach colour. I wish my computer showed colours as they really are. But Patricia sent a message, one of many actually, but Patricia was the first one, so the cardigan's going to go off to Patricia this afternoon, which I'll be going to the post office to post that. And these ones here, 2 sets. I would probably have these in time to post off to Jill as well. Because I like to wait until around about 3 o'clock to go to the post office, just in case I get any orders for my knitting patterns and that, and I can post them at the post office, because the post office, anything that goes into the post box is picked up the same day. It's picked up by 4:15. But if I post letters or anything on the post box on my estate, it's not picked up until 9 o'clock the next morning. So I like to wait until about 3:30 in case I get any patterns. So I'm over at the post office by about 3:30. So I've got plenty of time to finish this, and I only have so many rows. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I have about another 4 rounds to do on this, and it won't take me long. So I'll be able to get this packed up and post this off to Jill as well. So if you're watching Jill, these two will be posted off to you today, more than likely. And I've just remembered something else. When I was telling you the story about my mother, she also taught me to sew, to hand sew. My mother had a sewing machine. I think it was a Singer. It was a big sewing machine because of what she did and that. And she made a lot of clothes for us, our dresses and that, when we were kids, and for a lot of the neighbours as well. She used to get paid for making little dresses and things, and so she taught me. It was mostly hand sewn, but she did let me use a sewing machine now and again. But she was a beautiful hand sewer, my mother. And there was one time, I think, when I had my first son, when he was about 5 years old, I think. A lot of you will remember that series on the television with Lee Majors when he played the $6 Million Man. And he always used to wear a suit with that little short jacket here in the pants and that. And anyway, my son, Mark, my oldest son, he wanted what he called a $6 Million Man suit. And I went round all the shops trying to get a pattern, you know, the pattern where you had the pieces that you laid out on the material and cut around it and that, and I couldn't find a single one for anything like that. The trousers I could do from any pattern, but the jacket just was nothing I could find. So anyway, I used, I think it was just a little suit jacket I think I had belonging to him. And I managed to cut around the material, mark the material and cut around it, made the jacket shorter, and then the little bit that I would have to stitch all around the bottom for there was like a band, you got like a band around the bottom of the jacket, and I made this suit for him. And I remember the first time I went up, he was pleased as punch. He went to bed with that suit on for about a week. But I remember the first day I went up my mother's, who was wearing that suit, and she picked that suit to bits, every little fault she could find. You don't do it like this, and you don't do it like that. And she took the jacket off him, and she took the stitching out of the bottom part and made it so that, because I had just done the sides come straight down and then just turned that band thing up, but she knew how to do it, so it was stitched so that it was all in, looked like it was all in one, and she took it all out and she said, that's how you do that, and that's how you do that. So that was something else I learned from my mother as well, about how to sew. I made dresses for myself when I was younger, and in fact some of my friends I used to work with, I made 1 or 2 dresses for them as well. I had a sewing machine by this time, because I wasn't going to do it all by hand. But anyway, that was just another little bit I remembered, a little bit of a story. So that's my bit for today. So thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll catch you all another time. So bye for now.